Hi, it's Greg Dean from Vegan Action Global and the Explore Life podcast. And today is something very special for us today. The low-hanging fruit of being vegan is to change your diet. It means going from dairy to oat milk. It doesn't take much for us to move away from animal products in our diets and our entertainment or in our clothing, our fashion. But one of the most nefarious areas that even activists and well-intentioned people have is removing animals from their medicines, from their skin products, from anything to do with their health, because it is common that animals are used, billions of animals every single year in the laboratory industry. And so I brought in Rachel Smith, and she is an expert in this field. And I'm really excited to talk to her today from Animal-Free Science Advocacy. Thank you so much for coming on board with us today, Rachel.
Thank you very much for inviting me on, Greg. Thank you.
How long have you been working in this field?
I've been working for Animal-Free Science Advocacy. We were formerly known as Humane Research Australia since 2019, so just gone 6 years nearly. But I've been involved in animal protection issues for a very long time, really as I think, an inborn area of passion. Since I was very young, I was always collecting signatures for petitions and doing local actions, and went down the route of studying animal welfare science and working for a number of organisations, and was fortunate to secure a role at what was then Humane Research Australia, as I said, in 2019. But being, I think, knowledgeable about the use of animals in research, I used to support what was then the BUAV in the UK, probably when I was about 10, and used to collect signatures at school for, cosmetic petitions and that kind of thing. So going on over 20 years now.
Mm-hmm. How long have you been vegan for, and what brought you there to that choice?
Yep. I turned vegan when I was 22, and I'd been vegetarian for a long time before then. And it was just probably, as a lot of your guests, the same story. I became aware of the cruelty of the dairy industry, whereas before I'd thought, they're not killed for that product, that's fine. And then as I became more aware about the cruelty that was behind those products, it became a decision that I'll need to cut out those products as well. I timed it when I moved away from home, where I was responsible for buying everything myself. And that was the day I had my last cream cake. I can clearly actually remember it. And fortunately, we've got so much range of other vegan products now, you don't miss it at all. But so again, over 20 years ago.
Some people have moved into doing outreach, holding television. Some people will move their activism into rescuing animals or volunteering at sanctuaries. Mm-hmm. And then there's this field, the field that you're in. And it scares me a little bit in terms of what I don't know. Yeah. And I want to get there. Are you able to take me through how you moved into this field, some of the things that you've seen, and educate me on what I don't know?
Yes, well, I suppose in terms of my awareness of the subject, as I said, I'd always kind of followed organisations that were working on this issue. I think from a personal perspective, it is one of those issues that you think that's so difficult to work on, because why would all these researchers be conducting research on animals if there wasn't a benefit? And you can't rationalize in your head how it can still be happening. I was quite fortunate. I studied a master's in animal welfare science, and the course leader was Professor Andrew Knight. He's very knowledgeable on the use of animals in research and teaching. So he took us through a lot of his research into the kind of systematic reviews of the value of animal research or otherwise. And then I did my dissertation project on freedom of information legislation and how effective that is as an advocacy tool on the issue of animals in experimentation, specifically looking at the experience of groups in Australia, the UK and the US. And I think that was quite eye-opening as well, being able to establish, well, we have a system which in theory is disclosure of information that's from government agencies for the public domain, but really that study and I think the practice of having this role and trying to obtain the information, really that legislation often serves just, there's so many exemptions that it really is serving to protect the institutions from providing any level of true transparency. So in terms of what I've seen or learnt in the role, it's very vast. We're quite active in gathering information and exposing that information. So that means looking at lots of research publications, looking at AEC reports and applications, looking at what's been funded. We put together case studies of the research, and we will have an analysis on the animal-based research if we feel it's replicating existing knowledge or is particularly cruel or not valid a particular method, then we'll provide an analysis of that. But we also, I suppose, on the more positive side, we do showcase non-animal research methods and how they're used and how they're used in Australia as well, and do case studies on those. So I think that is also some kind of a bit more positive exposure I've had in the terms of the role, learning about the new animal research methods and seeing the changes that have been made in terms of regulatory approval for those. We obviously get a lot of students who are contacting us who want to use non-animal research methods. We have a lot of resources for members of animal ethics committees who are volunteering their own time, and a lot of the animal welfare representatives on those AECs would like to be stopping more research. So we'll try and provide resources for them on how they can better screen the applications and have their voice within those systems. But as I said, you do. We don't see so much distressing footage as such in Australia. That a lot of that hasn't really been collated or exposed, but it's a lot of information about the research that's being conducted, and it may be, for example, traumatic brain injury, very invasive research, or using for swim test, or using dogs and cats in veterinary research, or a lot of very highly distressing primate research. And a lot of it you hear about the research and you think, oh, that's completely unexplainable how that could be approved. For example, protocols such as scaring a primate with a rubber snake to see its reaction and things like that. People think that this is world-saving research, but a lot of it is really curiosity-led research that a researcher has got funding for and is repeating over multiple years, and you really can't understand how it's been approved. And I think as a taxpayer, it also angers me because we're all paying for this research. It's funded via the National Health and Medical Research Council in a lot of instances. So we are funding this particular research whether we like it or not. So that can be quite disturbing, I think, from a personal and professional view.
Tell me what animals are being used for in laboratories in Australia currently.
Yep.
Some of the experiments, and then we'll talk about which animals.
Yeah. So actually, use of animals in research and teaching in Australia is very, very broad. So I can move on to discussing the statistics later because it's very unclear, but there's quite a wide variety. So some of it may be more observational research, which we're obviously not going to be opposing if it doesn't have harm to that individual animal. It might be observational studies for conservation purposes. And then we have maybe animals that are used in agricultural research. So a lot of that might be to really try and improve the productivity of animals that are used for their products. There's research that might be testing how effective, for example, pest management baits are for target species in wildlife. There might be research which is looking at impact on the environment of a particular toxin, if it's exposed in the water, for example, a particular chemical or veterinary treatment. And then we also have biomedical research, so that is at the universities. So again, it's trying to explore the mechanisms and causes of particular diseases. And then there's also drug testing. So that might be administering a vaccine or an antibody and seeing the effect on an animal with the intention that that's supposed to assess how effective or safe it would be in humans afterwards.
Let's go a little bit deeper then. And can you tell me what experiments are generally done on animals and take me through that process? So what do people not know about currently?
Oh, I mean, there's...
Shock us, it's fine.
Yeah,
we just need to hear the raw truth.
Yeah. It could be, for example, looking at the aging process in a mouse and how their cognition declines after a certain period of time. It could be feeding an animal a fast food diet and seeing what the impact is on health, on their heart rate or cardiovascular system. It could be we've had exposing primates to bushfire conditions to see how that affects them. A lot of the times it's trying to induce a disease in an animal to then study the mechanisms of that disease to see whether they can identify a particular target, which they can then develop a drug for. So it might be in terms of mice and smoking. They will force mice to inhale cigarette smoke, and they're trying to induce conditions such as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or lung cancer or other conditions that may be associated with smoking. And then they're looking at different enzymes or different ways that is affecting the mice, and then trying to, as I said, extrapolate that to humans. So it's really, really broad. We do look quite closely when the grant funding comes out. I recently looked because the Medical Research Future Fund have just released their funding projects, and I generally have a screen through, see which ones involve animal models, and quite a lot of them still being animals being used in COVID-related research, sepsis research.
Take me through sepsis research.
Yeah, so sepsis research is a kind of infection that people can get often after they've been in hospital. And it's quite interesting that I noticed that particularly when that came out in the report, because research in using animals for sepsis research has got a very, very high failure rate. I'm sure it's over 99%. So it's quite unexpected. Well, you wouldn't want to be seeing research continuing to use animals in those kind of areas where it's got such a high failure rate.
What do they do to them?
Oh, I've only kind of got a very brief description of the project, but it's going to be trying to induce an infection, and then try and isolate why it may be happening. Is there a particular enzyme or protein responsible? Maybe trying to do different treatments and see if it has any response or not. But it's creating quite a painful and long-lasting condition in the mice to induce that state. And then they're going to be killed at the end of the research to make that assessment. So it's really quite broad, like any kind of disease state. They have been previously used in burns research, looking at the impact of kind of microplastics.
And what will they do to the animal?
So they would be obviously ingesting different levels of microplastics to see then how it's, passed through the system or the impacts that it's had. I'm just trying to think of other examples.
You said burns?
Yeah, have been used. Pigs or other animals have been used in burns research.
What do they do?
Again, it will be under anesthetic, but inducing a burn, and then again it might be trying to assess like how they might be able to do skin grafts or different conditions following surgery to try and replicate that particular research. But there is not so much of that conducted anymore because they can create artificial skin and other things. So we're not seeing so much of that, thankfully. Quite a lot of times they might use, for example, lambs in pregnancy-related research, or they've used lambs to try and replicate, looking into like shaken baby syndrome, but trying to recreate that using lambs.
So what will they do? What will they do?
So that would be, again, administering a lot of degree of force or shaking to the lamb to try and replicate what would be happening so that they can try and assess, I guess, a better way of determining if a child, infant, or baby has been deliberately, or maybe not necessarily deliberately, but harmed from being shaken or kind of abused. So they're using lambs to try and replicate that for, I guess, ways of being able to diagnose that.
So they'll take a lamb and somebody will shake the lamb, or they'll put him or her onto a machine and make the machine shake the lamb until his neck breaks? Or like, what am I looking at here? What don't I know?
I don't think that they've been put onto a machine. I think it's probably anesthetic, but just being by human force shaken, and then assessing what the impact is then on the brain and the development of that animal.
So essentially, a scientist will pick up a lamb, shake the lamb until, at varying degrees, and then the lamb will be disabled, potentially brain damaged, and then they will assess the damage. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I assume that there's probably more than one way of inducing it. Some of it might be surgical interventions as well, but effectively trying to, by force, induce injury that would be expected to be from a trauma to a baby, to be able to research into that particular area of. So whilst it's a worthwhile area, that it doesn't mean that you're using animals to try and develop cures in that or preventative work in that area. We've even had recently exposed using rats rather, inducing traumatic brain injury and then strangulation by a weight band on their throat to imitate intimate partner violence. So looking at close succession of strangulation and brain injury to see if it's in close succession, if it results in worse trauma, which I think is pretty obvious that it would do anyway, but replicating that in rats to study the mechanisms or different biomarkers of that.
So if we step back, because it's shocking for me, I think we've just touched on the surface, to be honest. I think it gets darker than this as well. But a percentage of the human population will commit domestic violence on their partner, predominantly the male against the female, obviously not always, but predominantly. And the human victim will sustain some type of injury. And so they've decided, let's strangle mice to see what level of strangulation causes mental disability or starved oxygen to the brain, just to see what that level of oxygen is starved to create this outcome.
Well,
is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, they've been doing it for a range of different reasons. It's not just one type of research. It's been a field of research. So as I said, they'll be doing strangulation and traumatic brain injury in close succession to see whether that's worse than doing them separately, which I think is a given anyway. Don't really need to do research to have that conclusion. And then they will be looking at if we induce those conditions on pregnant rats, how does it affect their offspring? And then they'll subject them to different behavioral tests to see if it's affected their cognition or is it increased their levels of anxiety. So it's not just one particular paper that's come out, it's a multitude of ones, and they've developed this particular method, which we think is ethically and scientifically invalid, but also really at odds of, it doesn't represent what would be human experience of intimate partner violence and different experiences that they may have, or post-traumatic syndromes that they might experience. It's not going to be the same in rats. It's a completely different scenario. So we have been drawing attention to that because that research is continuing.
What about dogs? Tell me some of the experiments that are committed on dogs in the laboratory industry.
That's actually quite a difficult one to establish exactly in Australia. I mean, overseas, in the US and the UK, they are used for drug testing to test the effectiveness and safety, apparently, of drugs, but they're not used for that purpose from what we can establish in Australia. I would say from the way it's reported is for the states and territories that use animals, some of them report, some of them don't. If they report on their use, they have one category, which is animal or human biology. So when you see dogs in animal or human biology, it's difficult to establish if they've been used for human research or veterinary research. I think the majority in Australia have been used for veterinary research. They were previously in the past, greyhounds were used, retired greyhounds, if you want to call it that, from the racing industry, had been used in dental surgery and I think cardiovascular surgery. We're not seeing that so frequently now. I think most of the research involving dogs will be kind of assessing the effectiveness of wormers or flea treatments or pet nutrition, but it's still involving the animals being confined into a kennel environment for a number of years. So it's definitely not something that's completely benign, but it's not quite the same as it is in the UK and the US, thankfully, at this point in terms of toxicology testing.
Can I just confirm then if what you're saying is correct, that in the greyhound industry, so the greyhound races, breeders will breed the greyhounds to race. They'll take them out on the track. They'll race them until they can race no more. And when they retire, instead of finding them a good home or taking them out the back and shooting them in the head, they will sell them to the science and laboratory industries where they will be committed to life of laboratory experimentation, where they're experimented on for dental surgery and other invasive procedures. Is that correct? So from the greyhound industry takes them, races them, they age out, and instead of being able to retire and enjoy their life, they're experimented on in the laboratory industry after the breeders sell them or the owners sell the greyhounds.
Yeah. I mean, that had previously been the case. A lot of the different greyhound regulation bodies have started to change their codes of practice so that animals can't be knowingly recycled into the research industry.
But they
so
were.
We haven't. Yeah, they were. And they were previously, well, even if it wasn't in medical research, they were also might be donated, their bodies might be donated to vet schools for their practical elements of their course. The University of Queensland had quite a bit of a review of their use of greyhounds recently, and they have temporarily suspended greyhounds from the racing industry being released for use for their veterinary students. But I mean, they could reverse that decision. So
it's a life of slavery. It's taken from childhood, from puppy childhood, forced into racing. And then in the greyhound racing industry, they will often use live baiting, even though they've outlawed it, people will still do it. Then the greyhounds will race, and when they're too slow or they age out, their life is set for laboratory experimentation and then to be killed. Is that correct?
Well, as I said, we haven't, the cases where we've seen them used is, over 5 years ago. We haven't seen recent ones. So I think things are changing in terms of the greyhound industry, and obviously there's been a lot of pressure on them where the animals end up, and in turn, but that had been the former route. They would often be used for surgical training or vet students, or their bodies used for the vet students, or used for the vet school, the dental schools or the vet schools or medical schools. But we haven't seen so many publications of that. And as I said, the statistics are so vague that it's they don't break it. We do requests asking for how many greyhounds have been used. The response we will get is that they're not defined according to breed on the statistics. So it's very hard to be able to track if greyhounds are still being used or not. But in theory, a lot of them, as I said, are changing their codes so that they shouldn't be ending up in research. But I can't say with any certainty whether they are or not, only that we haven't seen publications citing greyhounds have been used, which is something. But of course, we don't want other dogs to be used either.
They're kept hidden. It sounds that the information that you were provided is quite vague and intentionally so that they can continue their acts of depravity inside laboratories without realistically being answerable. It seems to me that just even based on the conversation we've had so far, is that it doesn't actually take too much in order to get a study approved. So, I want to find out how people might get scared around a snake. So let's continually scare monkeys until we evoke terror inside of them. And then we can say, well, that must be what humans must feel like. Am I wrong, or is there something deeper than that?
I think the problem is that whatever researchers are, really the justification is that they have to have new knowledge from something. But anything can kind of be new knowledge. It's more like, how essential is that knowledge? Do we really need to know what differences are going to be? And there is a process where there's an animal ethics committee which has to approve the research, and they have to do an application to the funder if it's seeking external funding. But from what we can see, there's very few examples where the animal ethics committee outright decline the application. It's either a yes or yes with some caveats, or make a few adjustments and then resubmit it. Very few times is there an actual no, this is not ethically acceptable. There may be someone that objects on the ethics committee, but the way it works is they really just have to have a majority yes. You don't have to have a consensus on the animal ethics committee. So I could be on the committee saying, no, this is just deplorable. But if all the other people on the ethics committee think it's fine, then my dissent might be noted, but that's as far as it's going to go in terms of opposing that particular research. So we really want to make it that the Animal Ethics Committee have more say and be able to be a position that it has to be everyone on that committee has to approve something before it goes ahead. And then I think we would see a great reduction in the number of applications that are going through and the type of research that's being approved.
What is one that has stood out in your mind that was approved? I'm sure there's many, but is there something in there that you just said, that is horrifying?
One, which is quite an old one, but it's not the fact that it's horrifying. It's just the fact that it's such a waste of money and so just worthless. It was feeding lamingtons to rats to see if it influenced weight gain. And it just stands out in my mind as just such a pointless project, because we already know the link between what you eat and your weight and your health. So it just seems, why are we subjecting mice to this, or rats to this in this case? So it wasn't that it was, particularly cruel, but just the pointlessness of it, that it was approved.
And on the other scale, what is one that really stood out to you as something that you felt, this is just horrendous? Because this is what people want to understand, and I'm trying to create this link.
I think, a lot of the research, I would say that I find particularly difficult is the xenotransplantation research. So that's transplanting organs between different species. So obviously they're trying to address the organ shortage by trying to see if we can transplant organs. So they're trying to use pig organs in humans. Obviously that has not been working in the recipients have been dying a short period after, but we're just continuing to do different trials, and there's a lot of research across the world into xenotransplantation. So they'll be transplanting organs from pigs into primates. So the whole process is involving quite a lot of suffering for the donor animal and the recipient animal, and they've got to be maintained in very sterile scenarios. There's all the animals that might die in the process of trying to get to the stage where you're transplanting the organ. Obviously, the animal dies after the organ was killed after the organ is transplanted, and then all the failure rates that are obtained, and then all the testing on the primate once it's had the organs or cells transplanted into it. And I just feel that that's not justifiable for the animals, but also there's other ways we could address the organ shortage in terms of mandating organ donation, or there's other technologies that have been invested in terms of creating synthetic organs and so on. And I feel like it's so much time and energy and expertise, I suppose, scientific expertise being invested in trying to push for xenotransplantation, but it's been tried for decades and it keeps failing for a number of reasons. The organs are rejected because it's from a different species. So that's one that really stands out in my mind, because it's, as I said, suffering for the recipient animal and for the animal that's received the organs. And the organs have been taken from.
Some people will say that, well, you can't avoid this because quite often in humans, we need to do a kidney transplant or a heart transplant or a stent into the heart. Pick the body part, and humans may need a transplant out of that. And there'll be people out there that say, well, hey, we need this to happen because this group of humans require it. And whatever the human requires, then they need to experiment on animals to make that happen. And it doesn't just go for your transplantation. I imagine it would be for a range of things such as cosmetic surgeries.
Yeah.
Are you able to take me through that? Are animals used to train surgeons for cosmetic surgeries?
I don't know so much about cosmetic surgeries. In terms of surgical training, for non-cosmetic surgeries, there's different emergency surgical training courses, and previously there was a pig lab was a requirement of one of those courses that has now been removed from the syllabus, but there are other courses that surgeons can do which will may involve practice on using typically pigs, but there is a whole range of alternative methods that they can use. There's a whole range of different very sophisticated non-animal alternatives, kind of perfused human cadavers, but also a whole range of different synthetic models that have been developed now that can be used for surgical training. So we don't have to use animals in surgical training. In terms of the cosmetic surgery, I don't know. I mean, there's different levels of, my understanding is there's different levels of qualification depending on what level of cosmetic procedures you do. In terms of like some of the cosmetic procedures that are administered by, I guess, more beauty technicians in terms of Botox and things like that, they are tested on animals, the actual batch testing of the Botox that's used in those injections. I think that's something for listeners to think about, because it's really just for vanity that some people may have it if they've had an accident, or they may have, I think people may medically have it for migraines or different things. But in terms of appearance, that I think people should be mindful that at this point there are alternatives, but typically those tests are tested on mice, and that involves paralyzing those mice. It's a very painful process to do Botox.
And that is used constantly. So it's not, hey, we've now created this medicine, let's get it out to market. They need to teach each batch before it goes out to market.
In it, yeah.
So what do they do to the mice in order to test a batch of Botox
They're,
before it goes out to
my understanding is
the
that
public?
they're testing to see at really high concentrations, at what concentration will be fatal. So that's why, I mean, the humans are never going to take it at that
Mm.
level of concentration, but it's a safety test to see at which stage the mice will be impacted by that
Mm.
particularly contaminated toxin and be fatal to them.
And you
So
said they'll be made paralyzed.
yeah, the well, I suppose the effect of Botox is to paralyze the muscles. So if you're administering it at that really, really high dosage to mice, then they're basically paralyzed and asphyxiate and die. And they're doing a test where they are getting to the point where 50% of those mice who are administered the treatment will need to die to see what the kind of lethal dosage is of that particular toxin. So it's a really horrendous test, and there is alternatives to it that have been developed, but they're still being implemented. So that's something I would say definitely for people to be aware of.
Is Australia better at hiding it, or do they just not participate in the practices?
I would say there's kind of a mixture. It's hard to find out exactly what's happening in Australia, as I said, because there's no national reporting. There's no kind of plain language summaries to see what's been happening in Australia, and there's no statistics or detailed breakdown of what each research comprises. But there is probably some research which wouldn't be conducted here, which would be potentially conducted out overseas. So that is a positive, in that there is some degree of that's gone too far. We won't do that. I still think obviously they're going too far with what they're doing, but I would say that there is definitely some level of ethics in what they are going to accept or not accept.
Well,
Yeah.
whenever there's a victim, there is always tragedy. So we know creating a victim for our choices is morally wrong. It's what they can get away with behind closed doors is something that vegan animal rights activists are advocating to learn. So we see with farm transparency, people sneaking into, farms. So they sneak into a range of different facilities in order to capture the footage. And I do know from back in the 80s, activists would break into laboratories and, take the animals, or they would film what's happening inside of there. Although from my research, it seems Australia is, is a fort when it comes to these laboratories. They're,
Yeah.
out further afield. They're not, in main CBD practices. You can also look at them like a prison. If you ever drive past a prison, there'll be a huge driveway, cameras everywhere, everything up. So there's no way to find out what's actually happening inside of those facilities. So I guess I wanted to find out a little bit more that of what we don't know, and then let's talk about how we can change so that we are no longer supporting the laboratory industry. Take me through that. Like, for example, do you know a percentage of animal experimentation where it just is useless for human use?
Oh, I mean, it's going to be hard to give a statistic in terms of research which is conducted in animals which with the intention of developing a drug. You probably heard the statistic that the failure rate after it's been tested in animals and proved to be safe and effective is about 95% in humans. So that's quite high. As I said, a lot of the research that they may be doing, trying to think of an example. For example, they might be, I'm looking at, I want to establish whether a marmoset is a suitable model for studying HIV. That's the intent of the research. So they've done the research to see whether they think it's a suitable model or not. They've purposely selected a project which has to involve animals to see whether they're a suitable model or not. So they can argue we couldn't use an alternative method. And then it can be argued that they generating knowledge on establishing whether this marmoset could be a particular good model for HIV or vision research or whatever they've established to try and find out. So whether it's got a failure or success rate, in their minds, it's got a success rate if it's answered the question that they've conducted. But we're kind of looking at it more as, well, how essential was that? Is that really just so that you can keep using marmosets in more research? And that's why you needed to establish that. So it's very hard to say, it can meet their criteria of success. It's got a publication, it's established that information, but has that actually benefited any human beings at the end of it? No. So, but the nature of the fundamental research that is conducted at universities, a lot of it isn't necessarily to have an outcome for human patients immediately. It's to build upon the knowledge they have. So sure, what they might be doing might be building upon knowledge, but usually from what we can see, that's just leading to more research publications or another iteration of the same kind of research using animals. And whether that then translates 30 years down to the track to animals, it's a bit of a gamble, but there has been research. A researcher in the UK looked at all the promising medical breakthroughs that had been reported in the media. And then I think a period of about 20 years later, look to see whether those breakthroughs had actually materialized, and the vast majority hadn't. So a lot of it is this basic research or fundamental research to look into mechanisms of disease. But then it's really not going anywhere beyond that kind of publications, or it's spoken about at a conference. But then you have to then look at it in the broader picture. What has it actually led to?
How do we as society stop supporting the laboratory industry? What are the things that we can do today to end that industry? That's really important. How do we end them so that they never profit?
Yep. I think there's quite a few different ways. And there are things that I try and do as well. I think being careful about which medical research organizations you donate to, because a lot of the major medical research organizations use animals in their research. So we have an initiative called the Humane Charities List, and you can look up health charities that provide support services or research that don't use animals. And so if someone's asking you, can you donate to this charity for my fundraiser, Diabetes Foundation or Cancer Council or whatever it might be, you can see if it's on that directory or not. And if you don't want to donate for that reason, then tell that person, I don't want to donate because I don't feel that that research is beneficial or meets my ethical standards, and these are the charities that I'll choose to support. And similarly, being careful, I suppose it's for more than animal research, but be careful where your super is invested, or careful if you have any other investments, which companies you're investing in, because it's a lot of investments are going to involve universities, and that will involve animal research, or it's going to involve pharmaceutical companies. So you are paying for it for your taxes, whether you like it or not, if you're working. So you can at least manage those contributions that you're making outside your tax. We always suggest to people, and people have different opinions on this, but you can also donate to take part in human studies. So I've taken part in a few. You can sign up. We've got a quite good page on our website, what you can do with a lot of these options on there, but you can sign up to take part in human studies. So it's not using animals. So it might be you suffer from asthma and you're providing data about your experience, or you can undergo a range of different scans to assess different things. So with that, you always need to clarify, if you're taking part in a medical study or survey or questionnaire, that it's not being conducted in parallel with animal studies, or intended to lead on to animal studies, but that is one way that you can also contribute. I think in terms of keeping informed on the issue, so that you can talk about it with your friends and your network, so people are aware that it's not this necessary evil. There are other ways of doing research. We've got our newsletter, podcast, social media channels, and we've got a lot of resources on there, on a range of bulletins on a whole range of different issues, ranging from cosmetics testing to forced swim tests to environmental impact of animal research, for example. So a whole load of information there. What else would I say? I think, as again with other issues, meeting with your representatives, meeting with MPs. We've got a lobbying guide for meeting with your MP, what issues you can ask for. We're mostly directing people to ask for the government to fund alternatives to non-animal research methods, because once those alternatives are validated and widely used, then that's going to be what phases out animal research eventually. So yeah, meeting with your MPs, supporting organisations like AFSA or rehoming organisations. You can adopt or foster an animal that's been used in research. You can fundraise for charities who are working in this area, or we have a whole range of different actions and case studies that people can send, automated letters to, or give guidance on submissions and all those kind of things. A bit, I suppose, depressing, but you can choose to donate your body after you've passed away. You can sign up and your body can be donated to a university to use for research. And you can also donate your brain for Alzheimer's research, which there's a brain bank that is investigating Alzheimer's disease, which is, I think, very worthwhile, because a lot of primates are being used in Alzheimer's research, and it's a human-specific condition. So I think thinking about those kind of things. I would also say, obviously, there's no guarantee, but I think taking responsibility for your own health, taking as many preventative measures as you can. So at this point in time, you can't take a drug or use a medical device that hasn't been tested on animals. They've all had animals involved as part of the safety or efficacy testing. That is changing. There's starting to be drug trials which have not had as many animals or no animals for in part. So that is changing. But yeah, definitely take responsibility for your own health and your own diet and your own preventative things. Like if you are going to engage in, like I said, things like Botox or smoking or vaping, all of those are going to induce conditions, which is then going to potentially lead to research there's a lot of research into the impacts of vaping and smoking, and we know that they have human health impacts. So I think we can't predetermine what conditions we're going to be susceptible to or not in every circumstance, but we can take responsibility for trying to live as healthy life as we can to prevent, excess research or the need for, multiple medications that are multiple drugs that are really being used as a slight variation of another one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so in summary, it's personal accountability, which will take us there. If we were to step back a little bit and discover one thing that you said, for example, a smoker or a drinker or somebody with a vice who is against laboratory experimentation will participate in that animal experimentation when they have signs of cancer or liver failure, because once they go to the doctor and the doctor says you need to now take this medication, you have clogged arteries, you need surgery, you need to take this medication, all because of that person's vice, an animal had to suffer and die. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think it's not only if they have to take the medication, but it's because, for example, with vaping, there's so much animal research that's taking place around vaping, which is looking into the, if it will have effect on the next, generation. If someone, is pregnant and vape and all those kind of different things, and what the impact will be, or is it better than smoking, or all these comparisons. So even if you're not taking the medication or impacted by it, you're still participating in something which is creating a new kind of niche of animal research.
Well, but this is where I was coming to.
It's hard because you can live a really healthy life. For example, you might want to engage in things like, well, I don't know whether it's healthy or not, but some people might think it's healthy. I'll do intermittent fasting, for example. But even those kind of healthy things, there might be mice that are subjected to intermittent fasting. We've got a completely different metabolism and diet than us anyway, because that's like a health fad which has been tested. So it's very hard to say only bad vices, because you can have good vices and they might be, it could be like, oh, I want to live a oil-free life. And then there could have been research conducted on animals also to try and support that particular position. So it's hard to say whether it's a vice or not, but I think at the same time, those particular vices, you know that animals are being used to try, and obviously often used by those industries to try and support what they're doing. Oh, we've made it safer, we've made it more health effective, or this is proven to be
So
less.
somebody like myself
tobacco
who will do
company.
intermittent fasting.
Mm.
So somebody like myself will do intermittent fasting. An animal has been experimented on to find out whether it's effective or not. And they may have been starved to death.
Well, probably not to death, but starved for long periods of time,
Okay.
And then so a company can promote that particular product.
Wow.
Or so it's hard. Whatever pathway you choose, probably an animal has suffered because of it. But
So whatever the condition, whatever the calamity is, whether somebody just wants to color their hair a different color, whether they want to smoke a cigarette, or hey, I'm moving off cigarettes and now onto vaping, an animal has been used. A human says, I now have this condition, or I believe that suffering from whatever this condition is. The scientists will look at it and say, well, let's put that in for a study, and which animals can we use? And they
that
will
seems to be
experiment on those animals. Doesn't matter what it
default.
is.
Yeah, it's hard, and it could be like a new type of food coloring that's used in a vegan product, for example. So it's so hard to
Right. So even let's say a new color on a vegan product, they need to experiment on an animal in order to approve that for use.
Yeah, I mean, there is beginning to be more alternatives that are legally accepted now. So I think we will, and I should have said actually in the previous question, in terms of avoiding or not contributing to the suffering, at least with household products or cosmetics, you can choose the Leaping Bunny, cruelty-free international Leaping Bunny products. So you can, choose cleaning products, household products and so on that are accredited, and they won't have been tested on animals. So that is one decision you can proactively make. But a lot of the other things, down the track, there would have been an animal test that would have been assessing that particular product.
This is why I felt it important to interview you. One of the issues that we face with critics of vegans or vegan animal rights activists, and we see this in trolling online, is that vegans are hypocrites because plants feel pain, or that standard issue of comment. But it is literally true that no matter which choice we take, we can avoid dairy, we can avoid eggs, we can shut down those industries purely by looking at the back of the label. But should we choose to do so, a scientist at a laboratory or a company has decided to figure out how that would affect humans by experimenting on animals. Oh, okay, so humans no longer want to consume dairy. What are the long-term effects on an animal by purely just feeding them oat milk? Just keep them caged and submitting them to these horrendous experiments. What's going to happen there? I just couldn't fathom it. It just hits my head. So somebody wears contact lenses. Well, what happens if their eye is scraped by the lens? And at what point does it cause blindness? Well, let's get a rabbit out and let's scratch their cornea with these types of contact lenses and find out which one's the softest one for the eye, the eyeball. Am I wrong? Is this what we're looking at?
It's very, very hard to find much that hasn't got a link to animal testing in some ways. I said that is changing as the new methods become accepted. It is really difficult one to avoid. And in terms of and again, with the COVID vaccine, it was if people have been vaccinated, hypocritical, or if you have any animal product, any drug, you're hypocritical. But the decision is really taken out of your control, because it's been the default method of developing drugs. So until such time changes, and I think it's coming pretty soon, where products are available which haven't been tested on animals, or devices are available which haven't been tested on animals, then you've got no option to select something else. So it is unfortunate, but I don't think that means that you're hypocritical. It just means that we have to invest our time and energy in trying to change that status quo so that there are options available, and it's beneficial for humans and for animals, because obviously we're all wanting cures for particular conditions. It's not as if we're saying that we don't want there to be developments in science. We just want it to be at not at the cost of animals' lives, and research that's based on human biology, not based on what happens in a mouse or a rat, or maybe potentially misleading or take us down the wrong path.
But it seems to me that the human race is the race that has the most diseases and conditions, and it's especially more so prevalent in modern society, where it seems to have gone backwards. We have more, tell me if I'm wrong here, but we have more diagnoses of cancer, we have more diagnoses of diabetes. It's not going backwards, it's going up. It's more people are getting age-related diseases, or more horrible things seems to be happening to their body based upon their habits, and doesn't seem to change. My father passed away of cancer, and I don't think they've ever found the cure for the cancer he had.
No.
That was back in the 90s.
Yeah.
So they haven't cured cancer. They
No.
haven't cured diabetes. They haven't cured a lot of AIDS. They haven't killed. They haven't cured so many of the diseases, and those are just the three, or that I would have base knowledge on. They haven't cured them.
No, it's really just kind of some drugs to prolong life, really, more than cures. No.
So where are the cures?
Yeah. I know. We're still waiting. We're still, as I said, that the often hit has been cured in mice hundreds of times, but it's just not translating. So it's because well, not only, but partly because so much has been invested in developing into animal models. We think it's going to be potentially life-saving, but then it doesn't have the same, there's a particular protein or a particular difference in mice, and we don't react in the same way.
I wanted to ask you about fetal blood from the slaughterhouses from unborn calves. Can you take me through that?
Oh. So I can take you through a little bit of what I know of it, but there is a particular serum that is used to grow cells called fetal bovine serum, and it is the taken from the blood of unborn calves at slaughterhouses, and so you can have I suppose you're trying to grow 3D cells, and so you're not using animals, but then it's not animal free because you're using the fetal bovine serum as a component to grow, as a kind of a feed or source for the cells to grow. But there are alternative methods that can be used. There is a new company that has just launched, I've forgotten their name, in Australia recently, but we did a profile about them in our website, with a synthetic alternative, which is not only ethically better, but from my understanding, if it's based on human blood platelets or not based on animal ones, then it's going to be more relevant to the human condition as well.
Bovine serum is taken from slaughterhouses, is that correct?
Yeah.
And that's taken from calves that were born inside slaughterhouses as their mothers were killed?
No, they, after the mother's killed, I think that they inject a needle into the uterus and take the blood out of the calf then. There's a certain age period of which they are saying that the calf should not be able, if it's not fully developed, it shouldn't be able to feel it. But I think that's a bit controversial in terms of that. And it's really, I guess, a means of defending the slaughter industry anyway, by saying, we can get an extra product out of it.
Well, I have a friend who's now vegan after experiencing PTSD, and he was a slaughterhouse worker. And what haunted him was the fetal room. And he said that calves are born inside the slaughterhouses at a higher rate than we would possibly understand, because farmers and the slaughterhouse companies themselves know that they can sell a liter of fetal blood for $500 a liter. And so the calf will be born inside the slaughterhouse be taken to a fetal room, and then blood will be extracted from the calf's heart as their blood is pumping. So the calf is still alive and conscious through
Mm.
all of this. And then that's sold to the laboratory industry.
Mm.
And yes, I'm sure it's in the calf or the inside the cow's womb, but for the percentage that are born inside the slaughterhouse, all of that goes to the laboratory industry.
Yep.
And it's just this cycle of violence that just seems to continue.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
And I think it's going to be not, you can have rules around it, should be unborn and those kind of things, but who is going to be there inspecting that at the slaughterhouse, making sure those things are happening or otherwise. So yeah, it's definitely one of those products that is not necessary. And yeah, it's continuing because people are making money out of it, but there are alternative ones. So
to choose your level of depravity, that's what
yes,
I kind of got it down to.
I
have this
Scientific, that was the one. They've developed this fetal
Sorry,
bovine
which?
serum. Media City Scientific, they are a new Australian company that have developed fetal bovine serum replacement. It's a chemically produced alternative, and from what I can understand, there is less variability from batch to batch than using blood from calves as well. So it kind of has some scientific advantages as well.
I have this working theory that the animal exploitation industry keeps humans trapped as well from childhood all the way through to old age and death. So we start with the animal agriculture industry, and the government and the industries encouraging this through marketing to consume all of the products which make us sick. So dairy, for example, made me sick throughout my childhood. Asthma, congestion, every cold that's out there. Meat can cause gout. You consume meat, there goes your gout, there's high cholesterol. So everything that you would get in terms of ill health from consuming animals and their products will then get you to the point where you're all good to go throughout your childhood, but you hit your 30s and your 40s, and the doctor says to you, don't stop eating those products, but just take these medicines to go with it. So the amount of people that I interview in my career that have high blood pressure is through the roof, cholesterol tablets. And I asked them a lot more about that. And they're inherently consuming a lot of animal products. So from the start, from the childhood, we're consuming animal products. And then when we get to a certain point, they say start taking these medicines. And this is where the laboratory industry or the science industry takes over to make money from the exploitation of animals simply by developing medicines that counteract the symptoms that go along with the issues related to animal consumption.
Yeah.
So, provided we don't stop consuming the animals, they therefore have a whole ecosystem to consume our bodies as almost as their experiments, and at the same time experimenting on animals and killing the animals.
Yeah.
You brought it really home with the greyhounds. So the greyhounds in the greyhound industry go through a life cycle of abuse and then are given to the laboratory industry. Maybe not so much now. I'm sure it hasn't ended completely, especially in some countries, maybe not Australia. But then their life cycle is to die in a laboratory. And you can look at this from every animal's perspective, but you would look at it from the life cycle of, say, an ecosystem of money for the laboratories. From the start, you have the breeders of the monkeys, of the sheep, of the dogs, and they get paid a lot of money and they want to protect that. So they will keep breeding all of those animals, and for this X price, they will sell those animals through to the companies, the laboratories. They will then get funded by, those bodies that will experiment on those animals with no clear outcome, no ending of cancer, no ending of diabetes, but a pill that will make us consume consistently. So it's like the ultimate subscription-based service, like having a Netflix account. You would just subscribe to getting your tablet each and every month. We're not going to cure it, but if you take this tablet every month for the rest of your life, you'll be okay. And so they make money. The labs pay the breeders. The labs are making their money from selling the end product of the medicines, and then we become the victims as well, provided we don't stop doing all of those things that we were trained to do from birth, like consuming animal products, consuming things that are inherently bad for our body, cigarettes, vaping, alcohol consumption, which is also experimented on animals. And it takes us through this whole life cycle of abuse all the way through to the end.
Yeah.
I've thought deeply into that. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And it's reminded me because I really wasn't very nice, but I had a Christmas card which I used to send to people every year. And it was exactly about that cycle. It was, we eat all these animals, then we develop these conditions, then we test on the animals to cure the conditions. And then every Christmas we wish peace on earth and then we start again. And it's exactly that cycle. It's I feel like in terms of like economic motivations, a lot of the researchers, I don't think they haven't moved into that field with a intention of trying to make money or exploit people. They've gone into it with the right intentions, but there's all these other intercepting industries in terms of the contracting research organizations that are making a lot of money by being contracted to conduct the toxicology studies. There's the animal suppliers of the cages. There's the breeders, like you say. And they are funding the kind of helping to sponsor and fund events and funding the research and funding the industry bodies. And not so much in Australia. You don't get so much kind of lobby groups in Australia. We have Understanding Animal Research, which is an organization promoting animal research, but more from my understanding in the US, lobby groups that are, actively there in the room trying to oppose if there's guidelines that are seeking to replace animals. I wouldn't say it's at that level in Australia, but definitely economic interests because a university is getting research grants from research using animals, or they are occasionally being contracted to conduct pharmaceutical studies and they're getting income from that. So, or they've simply invested so much in the kind of animal research infrastructure, massive self-cleaning cages, new equipment that they don't want to, and so we've invested all this money, we want to move to a different method, or we've spent all this money on setting up a surgical animal lab for our medical school. We don't want to change the whole syllabus and move to another method because they've invested so much money in one particular method. So I think there's a couple of economic angles. The cost to then move to a new system and the financial benefits they're drawing from using animal research. But at the same time, animal research is quite expensive. It's expensive to acquire the animals. It's expensive to pay the animal care staff and the vets and everything. So,
but that's an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because the RSPCA would not exist if not for animal cruelty. They essentially need animals to be exploited and abused in order to exist to pay all the wages. It's, the people at some of these organizations get paid huge amounts of money to run the organizations, massive amounts of money. They are not there volunteering whatsoever. And so, of course, they need it to continue. And so they've spent all this money setting up this way to do experiments on animals. So why change if it's going to cost them an extra $1 billion to change? It's easier just to keep funding the industry because the lab technician has a job. He or she went to university for 8 years to learn how to experiment on animals, and now they're not going to be ready for non-animal experimentation. They get to pay the vets. The vet has a job. The people who create the cages, they have a job. The breeders, they have a job. And all of those contribute to the victims. And it seems to me that's the whole economy. It's in its own environment, much like the farming industry. I've walked in my work to a factory where they took the freshly torn skins off cows after they were slaughtered, and they were fresh, and they were all in these buckets soaked in salt, so that they could eventually be dried out and eventually turned into car seat covers, for example, or jackets. And it's its own economy, because now you get to pay your migrant workers, and you pay your slaughterhouse workers, and you pay the vets to come in and you inject the cows with vitamin B12, with everything. And all of that then goes back to the lab industry, because how much B12 or how many nutrients in an injection do we need to give a cow? Well, let's just experiment on animals in the lab industry to do it. It all circles around the violence and all circles around the exploitation. And here we are in our daily lives, not even realizing how much we don't know.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I think it's a confusing one, because you have all that profit that they're making from certain segments are making from animal research, but the actual losses for the pharmaceutical companies in trying to bring a drug to market, which can cost up to $1 billion and take, a decade. And if it fails, then they've wasted all that time and money. So it is actually in their interest to, I know what you mean. You can have substandard drugs, which are just to keep people going, not curing, but the non-animal research methods, like if you're using organ on a chip and so on, they're so much more time effective and so much cheaper than using primates. So it's got to the point where some of the drug companies are now trying to push back on the regulators and saying, we don't want to use animals in this. We don't think we need to. And they're only even one drug company suing the FDA because they didn't want to use dogs in the test. So I think that there is some more ethical parts in that are trying to push back, but it's almost the regulators haven't kept up to speed with the new technologies and what the companies can do without animals. And so they don't want to necessarily risk approving it if something goes wrong. But at the moment, things are already going wrong by using animals. So it's not the point that you're trying to change something from amazing to iffy, because we've got iffy already. So it is a confusing one, but I would definitely say that there's economic reasons. There's economic reasons to move away from animal research, but there's certain segments that will resist because it's what they've always done, for some it's profitable. Yeah.
Take me through then where we go from here, including some of your campaigns. Greater transparency in animal research, for example, the right to release, say no to dissection. What are some of the campaigns that you're undertaking, and how does that have a real world effect on us as a society and moving away from animal exploitation?
Yeah, and you've mentioned a few of them. So our central campaigns in Australia are Say No to Dissection, which is providing guidance to high school students what they can use as alternatives to animal dissection. And really, we're trying to prevent the early stages of seeing animals as a commodity to be used. In schools, they might use purpose-bred animals for dissection, or they may use an animal from an abattoir, or even animal parts from a supermarket. But we're trying to change that perception that animals are here for our benefit, and we just always turn to an animal for scientific purposes from an early stage. The right to release, again, that's a campaign for it is, I suppose, specious, and that we are targeting dogs and cats as the animal that labs are most likely to be able to rehome, that live a longer life and are rehomable. So there has been progress in New South Wales where cats and dogs have to be rehomed after more than 3 years of use. So that's one of our campaigns, to at least have a quality of life after the lab for those animals. Transparency is a really important one, because we touched a little bit on it. There's no national reporting of animal use in Australia, so we can't see if there's any trends. We can't see the animals that were used across the country, if it's gone up or down, what they're being used for, what were the outcomes of that research, how much funding was directed to animals or non-animal research methods. So unless that information is available, it's really hard to change where we are or measure how we're going. So that's and as I said, we're taxpayers. We have a right to that information to know what we have funded and what impact it's had. The brand primate campaign is one of our predominant campaigns because we feel like there's a real opportunity. Australia isn't using as many primates as other research led nations, and we already have some protection for great apes. They can't be used for invasive research. We want to try and apply that protection that's currently for them to all primates. So at the moment, macaques, marmosets, and baboons and owl monkeys are used across Australia. We want them all to have that same protection. The protection at the moment is based on their kind of level of sentience and cognition and the fact that they recall what's happened. They've got long lives. They're repeatedly used in experiment after experiment. And it's usually highly invasive research and they can be kept on individually housed. So that's one of our predominant campaigns. We feel like we've got a real chance with that because people care more, whether we like it or not. Most people care more about primates than they do about mice because a lot of people in Australia, unfortunately, still see mice as, vermin or a pest species and don't have much empathy for them. So that is a struggle in terms of gaining public support. And then we also have Fund the Future of Science. So as I mentioned before, at the moment New South Wales has some funding for non-animal research methods, but excuse my dogs. We've got no federal funding for non-animal research methods, and other countries have got millions of dollars or centres for validating new animal research methods, and that's what we need to have to encourage a way of doing things for these methods to be, the default rather than using animals. We really need a redirection of that funding. So we've been quite active in this space, putting forward submissions for budget funding for the recent budget submissions. Had calls to MPs to fund this for a number of years, and I hope we'll make some traction on that particular campaign. I think that's the gist of them. So yeah, they're all kind of set at slightly different levels of ambition. And some of them might be dependent on others. You need to get the transparency in order to be able to expose something, or you need to get the transparency to say, this could be done in a better way. And then the funding can be linked to the primate campaign because if you have validated methods, then there's more incentive to use those in place of primates. So they're all quite interlinked. And then beyond those campaigns, we also have a staff member who is focused specifically on working with different international groups to try and change, because Australia is also subject to different international guidelines on testing of drugs and guidelines. And she works with those groups to try and make the non-animal research methods be accepted by those international guidelines. So we're quite active with the TGA lobbying and trying to put the framework in place where those who want to use non-animal research methods have got the confidence that they'll be accepted, because they don't want to go through the whole process in the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Australia agency in Australia says, oh no, we're not accepting that. So really trying to work to make that information clearer to the drug companies so that they can use the non-animal research methods, which is, a challenge as well.
And how can people support those non-animal research companies?
Yeah, so I think probably the things they can do is, it depends on if you're a researcher, we've got like a business case for non-animal research methods. You can sign up as a supportive researcher for that. Otherwise, we've got a pre-generated email that people can send to their MP saying that they support funding to be directed towards non-animal research methods, and send that email or request to meet with your MP. Let them know that it's important to you and why these, and compare, there's a lot of arguments you can put forward in terms of we're really behind the times in Australia compared to other jurisdictions that are moving ahead with the funding of non-animal research methods, or they've got phase-out plans, or the government has committed to, an end to animals experiments. Whereas here in Australia, the government is really not active on the issue at all. It's just not on their agenda. So we've got to keep making it be part of their agenda. And yeah, partly the economic reasons are to get it on the agenda. So that's probably the one that comes to mind.
How many years do you believe it will take for the animal testing to end? Do you have a
We,
timeline, an estimated timeline, or is there any way we can speed that up?
I mean, the countries that have set a phase out plans have been quite hesitant to give timelines. In the US, they have a timeline for chemicals, which I think is 2035. At least no testing on mammals after 2035. I know there's groups in the UK which are trying to advocate for a 2030 timeframe on most animal uses. I think the unfortunate reality is that it will be slower in Australia because we're not a driver in this particular issue and we're falling behind other countries. But we can speed that up by really putting the pressure on the government. And I think as an organisation, we're an advocacy organisation, but we're also engaged with the research community. We're trying to highlight the benefits of non-animal research methods, provide case studies of what they've done, have connections to funding opportunities, provide information about conferences or workshops or things, and let people know that there is another way of doing things. So I think that it can change with political pressure, but can also change internally with the researcher community saying, oh, we actually don't want to use animals. We don't think that they're effective or ethical, and we'd like to be trained in this method that's our counterparts are having overseas is the future, and different computer modeling or organ on a chip or mini organoids or sophisticated AI methods or other methods that are going to be more effective. I think a lot of the research communities, they don't want to be left behind using animal models if that's not effective, and say, oh, another 20 years, we still got no further with cancer or the other conditions. I feel like the medical kind of peak bodies in Australia can be quite conservative when it comes to change with animal research and maybe not representing all the views of their members. We very much have a narrative in Australia that our non-animal research methods, they're okay, but they're complementary. We use them and animals together. Whereas other countries are really moving more to the replacement. Australia, I can definitely see this trend to, we just use them both. And that's not what we're advocating for by any means. So it's just a different level of, I guess, ambition.
Okay. So I went into our interview really not knowing much at all about how to advocate, and I came out with a lot more knowledge, and there's a lot more to unpack. What I really took away from what we have gone through today is some steps that we can take as society, as vegans, as animal rights activists, and also animal exploiters, those who consume meat, dairy, eggs, all those other animal exploitation products can do if they're against animal laboratory experimenting. One of them, obviously, check the labels. 2, make sure that they have is it the rabbit that's on there?
Leaping bunny, yep.
Yeah, the leaping bunny on the product to make sure that that was not experimented on animals. The other way to go would be to minimize the vices that we currently have that are experimented on animals. I just seen too many images of cigarettes being shoved into rabbits' mouths and, forced into dogs and cats, and it's endless. So, removing these vices from our lives to try and live healthier, to have accountability as humans on our own health and also the health of our loved ones as well. On top of that is to look through your website for groups or companies that don't experiment on animals, and if they are going to be donating money to an organization that is in the same field as curing those human conditions, that they don't experiment on animals. When I see these people at shopping centers raising money for cancer research, I don't give money because I know what they're going to do with that money. I know that an animal will suffer and die for that. I just don't. I can't.
Mm.
So it's better to be on your website, and if you're really keen on finding the end to a human calamity, is to look for those companies that are not experimenting on animals. And another way would be, unfortunately, at the end, we get buried in the ground. You'll inherently drive past a cemetery, or people will say, just burn my body and throw my ashes into the ocean. Whereas what they could actually do is donate their body
Mm.
to the science industry. So that is just one gift that they are leaving, because that just may save the life of a dog. It may save the life of a monkey. You just don't know.
Mm.
You really don't know, but every little thing helps. So we can feel helpless in our current world. I know that, like I said at the start, it's easy to remove animal products from our diet, but then some scientists will say, I wonder what the effects of going completely vegan is like on a cat. Let's work that out. And they will inherently experiment on a carnivore to see what that's like. We can't avoid it.
Mm.
We're not in control. We can only control ourselves. And if we collectively change, not just one person has to control themselves, but collectively over time, they make these simple changes, then you do see it. You're not going to see it tomorrow. We might not see it in our lifetime, but surely we can do more and be better. And that's the whole basis of where we're at with our moral stance. It's not a diet. It's not about, just animal suffering in the food industry. It's overall, it's this exploitation and how we view animals at our pleasure, at our leisure, to do whatever the hell we want to them, and then hope that society doesn't even ask any questions about it. That's kind of where I've learned, and I think today I've taken a lot away where we can actually do a lot more.
Good. Yeah.
Now, I just want to quickly ask you: you're going to be speaking at the Animal Rights Forum in Sydney.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that. What are we looking at? Tell me a little bit about what to expect.
Actually, my colleague Robin will be there talking about our primate campaign. She's going to give quite a lot of examples of how primates are used in Australia, where they're used, what they're used for, what our campaign is about, what we're trying to achieve, and what people can do to support that particular campaign, because we really think we've got some opportunities for primates. And I'm going to be on the anti-vivisection panel with a number of other panelists. So people can come and fire their questions at us, and hopefully that'll be useful. And it's great. They've got a few anti-vivisection sessions this year. So, and there looks like a lot of other great speakers. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
To humanize this a little bit with an animal, do you have any stories of even just one being that has left the lab industry, that has been rehomed or has been rescued somehow, that has turned their life around, and you can see the truth inside when looking at them or seeing how they behave or seeing their new life?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate because I've fostered and adopted dogs from formerly used in research. And I don't know what type of research they were used for, but they come from that environment without having any exposure to, the outside world. So it is a big adjustment for them. But in the space of the number that I've adopted and rehomed, you see a massive transition in their confidence and their happiness, and they start to learn to become a cheeky, naughty puppy again, and they kind of almost get a second puppyhood because they spent, their puppyhood in a research facility, and they come to trust you and, come for a cuddle and do their little naughty things. And, one beagle that I have who is 5 now, and when she came out very early from research at 9 months, she's still, affected now from walking on the streets. If she sees someone that she doesn't know, then she's a bit on edge. So you see that it's a
Mm.
lasting effect, but you definitely see such a change just in a short period of time, and they learn from each other as well. We've got 3 now at the moment, so they pick up, what normal life is, and they, every day they'll do something new. They'll have a little run or cuddle up with the other one or do something cute. So that's really nice.
I'd imagine that they may have fears around certain situations, such as closed spaces or enclosed spaces. My last rescue had a whole range of phobias based upon her childhood, and I just imagine it would be the same for beagles and other dogs.
Mm.
Maybe just ask you then, is there any organization out there that can assist to rehome if somebody's considering an animal instead
Yeah.
of spending thousands of dollars on
Mm.
a pure breed? What can they do? Is there any organization
Yeah.
where
Well,
people can consider?
we do have on our website kind of a list of ones in other countries, but in terms of Australia, Beagle Freedom Australia, they rehome dogs and cats, and Liberty Foundation rehome some dogs and cats, but mostly mice and guinea pigs. I think they're opening up a new rehoming centre in New South Wales. So definitely follow them. They're looking for foster carers, volunteers, and adopters, and they're getting more animals through with the right to release legislation. So they need all the help they can get, and it's very, very rewarding and a wonderful experience. So I definitely highly recommend following them and supporting their work.
Any final words you want to leave us with? Any words of wisdom that our viewers can take away that we might leave
Yeah,
with
I
them?
think as I said, I think it is one of those issues that is difficult, and you, because you can't just make that choice if you have a medical condition not to take the medication and so on for your own health, or need to be around for your friends and family and so on. But there is, I think, I just want to leave people with the hope that there is change coming. And I really hope that for everyone's benefit, the new animal research methods are used more broadly, because as well as reducing the animal suffering, I think if we're focusing on medical research, on research based on humans and not on how we think things how things are, working on the different species will just make so much more progress, and everyone wants to see that progress. It's been too slow, and I really think it will revolutionize medical research. So please take all these steps that we're taking, because no one wants to be funding animal research from their taxes, and there is an opportunity to speak up against it and make informed decisions and spread the word and do little actions where you can. I know there's a lot of other issues and a lot of things that everyone's working on and donating for, but don't feel intimidated by this particular issue. It's not a necessary evil. There are better ways of doing research, and we really just need to start pushing towards those in everyone's interests.
Rachel, thank you so much for your time today. I'm excited for where we go in the future. I really hope the animal rights activists can now advocate better when they're doing outreach, and take us to the next level as to where we need to go in the next 10 years.
Yep, I hope so. Thank you very much.